Well, that's all you guys do. Vegas is weeds. No fixes in absence. You have a quorum?
Not so far. Everyone, it is 3:30. The Solid Waste Management Authority of the City of Crescent City and the County of Del Mar, State of California, is now meeting in regular session. Only those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at the assigned time. All other items may be taken out of sequence to accommodate the public and staff availability. We kind of changed up the agenda a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't screw all of us up too much. We'll work with it the best we can. It's all my fault, even though I would like to blame Rich because he was there. No, it is my fault. I tried to streamline a little bit, make it a little more efficient. Hopefully make it a little more efficient. Are we going to have a closed session, Kevin? So there will be no closed session at the end of this meeting. At this time, I'd like to open up for public comment period. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. If you are speaking about an item that is on the agenda, I may ask you to hold your comments until that item is taken up. After receiving recognition from the chair, please give your name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment?
Mary Wilson, Ocean World. I'm coming in today because of thinking about what happened at the last meeting we were at, and in that the board had called for the solid waste staff to go over an overview of the franchise collection contract for Recology. And so Mr. Ward gave a really nice PowerPoint presentation, and it all seemed really reasonable. And that, however, he neglected to bring up a portion which was the rate increase on the businesses up to 60%. Why, again, George's Autos went from $250 up to almost $500, or over there at Walgreens from $1,300 to $2,400. That was omitted, and I brought that point up at the last meeting, but the more I have got to think about it, the direction was given from the board to give an overview of the new Recology contract, and that was not in it. How could that be? It was to bring up the new changes. To me, that is a glaring omission, and I feel that this board, I hope, is trying to get to the truth. We have a new board member. He doesn't know about a lot of the history in regards to the contract. Anyone sitting out in the audience could not have known what the differences were in the contract by Mr. Ward's presentation. We need to get to the truth, and you have to have all of the facts in order to get to that. So I don't really want to, I know the board is going to need to address staff, I hope, that they would find out why. Not only why was it not omitted, later Mr. Hendricks stood up after me and did not go into why it wasn't in there, but it didn't even address why the rates have increased that much. So again, in thinking about how it all happened at the last meeting, we need to try and get to the truth, and in order to do that, we have to have all the facts presented, especially by staff. We cannot just hear what they want to tell us. We need to hear all of it, and I hope that, again, the board will address staff regarding that.
Thank you, Mary. Any other public comment?
Paul Dillard with the county. I just kind of want to talk about perceptions. I'm glad to see everybody's here and good. I'm glad to see that you're video streaming this. I think that's important. I think you heard the public say that, or at least me, say that it should be video streamed, and I think that's important because now nobody can raise a thing that they don't know what's going on and you kept things in the dark. It's their fault if they don't watch this. You put it on there and that's good. The other areas as far as perceptions I want to go into is, and I'm glad to see that the triplicate is here, because in today's paper on Section B, they talk about what's happening in the community. You guys are a non-item, so I hope the triplicate will clear that up and get it in the paper that you people are taking the time to meet and analyze these things. The other thing I'm going to drive, and I'm not going to go into really topic on what's on item 6.1, but in 6.1, that's your audit and and it speaks to, I think it's January 20th by Kevin and to you on possible corrective actions and plans. In that document, there are pages that are marked purpose or intentionally left blank. You got to think about what the people see that on the web. And I'm sure there's a reason, and I just kind of want you to kind of address that, because I'm sure there's a reason that that's blank. But when it's in a financial audit, people read into stuff. And I think you should probably address that so that all perceptions are clear and people know that you're trying to do the right thing, and that's whatever reason that's blank, it's blank because there's several pages. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, I'm going to close the public comment period, and we will move on. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Items 1.1 through 1.5.
Move to approve items 1.1 through 1.5.
Sorry.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment on the consent agenda only? Okay, seeing no public comment, then I'm going to bring it back to the board. Any questions or comments from board members? Leslie?
Yeah, I just had one question in the beginning of the minutes where it shows through all of the and it started off with Chair Jackson Murray, and then we don't list Vice Chair on there. Is there a reason?
No, but I
Okay. Pardon me?
Just a correction.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if the chair's not going to be here.
I've got a question on the resolution 1.2. It shows that this is regarding the carpet, and in face value, it looks like it's a good deal. $52.58, which is a significant reduction. I believe almost 60%, something like that, reduction, which is fantastic. So whenever anything good happens, it's always nice to highlight that. Might not get too many of those. And the other thing, though, that caught my eye is that carpet clean and rolled. Is that clean and rolled comes out of the store, not out of my house. So what's the criteria there for actually being able to get this reduced rate rather than have to go back to the $1.38, whatever?
Yeah, I dropped a draft brochure in front of all of you. The carpet manufacturer is paying for producing some of these brochures to pass out to the people, especially the carpet installers, people that are in the business, because they're most likely to be able to take advantage of this because of the quantities and the ability to do that. You got a color version, but we also set it up so that it could be black and white, and I have a few extra copies if anybody in the audience is interested.
So the bottom line is it just needs to be rolled?
What they want for the carpet recyclers, because what they do is they shear the fibers off of it and they recycle it into like auto parts and other things. So if it's rolled with the fibers on the outside, they can see it, they can sample it. That's what they prefer. We're trying to meet the standards for the carpet recyclers. It needs to be dry because once carpet gets wet, it starts to get nasty. And clean in the sense of not store-bought clean, but not mixed with other stuff, mostly, is what we need.
I guess my main question was, and I understand taking the tack strips out, but when cleaned, does it mean if you have carpet's been soiled by animals, that it has to be cleaned prior to rolling it up and throwing it away?
No, we're not asking people to steam clean their carpet before they throw it out. That's kind of like washing your garbage.
Well, exactly. That's-
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we
But
didn't have a false
To be clear,
positive.
this is a one-year pilot program that's being funded by the carpet manufacturers, and it will be a learning experience for all of us, including the carpet installers. Is it worth it for them to do this? We'll do our best to ask them to meet these standards. Once the first truckload gets hauled down to the carpet recyclers, they will give us feedback, and hopefully we'll do it in a way that's acceptable to them. But we're one of 6 rural counties that volunteered to participate in this pilot program, so this isn't happening statewide yet. In fact, it's not happening anyplace yet, but we will be among the first counties that will be getting this service from the carpet recyclers. And predominantly, and the reason I am very often involved with large organizations, the same as you, David, is to make sure rural issues get represented. And when carpet manufacturers look at recovering 90% of all the carpet in California, it's that 10%, that's us. So.
I know, I just removed a bunch of carpet.
Any
Well-
other comment?
Early.
Any other comments or questions from board members?
One quick question. Kevin or Ted, have you yet taken the time to revisit the city's lab to see if there's any lab work the city can do instead of sending it out?
Ted?
No follow-up since the last meeting, but the word we had was that essentially it was, we ran many tests that the city is not capable of doing within their lab. And the other thing is timing about when the samples arrive. Bottom line is we were not able to come up with something that really worked for both parties.
And the last time you met was?
It was probably 6 weeks ago that we talked about this, so I could do additional follow-up. Had things changed at the lab that you're aware of?
No?
No.
I just forgot that you had already done it.
Yeah, I think we were, but
Kitchen.
it's okay. We'll reiterate when we have to.
Anything else from board members? And that's my fault, David. I did put that on consent agenda, but you're right. We should have highlighted that particular program. Would have been a good idea. But that's certainly my fault in streamlining, but thank you for bringing it up. Okay, we've had a motion and a second. Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Finnegan?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
Commissioner Westfall?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamara?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and this is the part that's going to be kind of new. We're going to have a verbal director's report, and within that report, he's going to include these things that are on the agenda. And if there's any comment on it, we will take that all at one time when he's done. Kevin, please.
Yeah, let's see if this works. This is, I think, a good idea for things that don't require action, so we can provide it all as one lump sum content. And the 6 items on this, I'll just give a brief overview, is the claims approved by the director, the monthly cash and charge reports for January. There's a revenue comparison chart that I prepare and update every month. The treasurer controller report, which is a report we get from the auditor's office, which wasn't available when we printed the agenda. For those of you that are watching, it is available in our office. It was one of the only documents that wasn't published online when we copied everything and put it online, but the board members have that now. That's the report for January. The board asked for a report on status, specifically budget information on the 3 major grants that we have, so that's in front of you. And the 6th item is update or a status report on the mandatory commercial recycling law that got passed in California. And then one thing that's not specifically on the agenda that I wanted to just touch on briefly is the grant that we have related to the, from the California Integrated Waste Management Board is providing funding for advertising on needles and proper needle disposal. So I've given you all a copy of this brochure that's been printed. We have, I'll just hold this up, posters with the same kind of content that are getting prepared to go out to every place that distributes needles so that the customers can become better informed. The grant will also pay for radio and newspaper ads and truck signs. Recology has agreed to put truck signs on the sides of the trucks with the same kind of content pictures on not to put your needles in the garbage, put it in the proper red containers, take it back to a proper location. Same message over and over. Be a very intensive campaign coming up in the next month or so to make sure that we can reach everybody possible. On the best news part of this is that this advertising, the momentum on this, helped me when I went to the healthcare district last Tuesday night. The healthcare district agreed to provide $1,000 in funding to help underwrite the costs of needle take-back at the senior center and at the community health clinic, which is located in the wellness center. So the healthcare district is going to pay for the collection and disposal of needles, and we have a preliminary agreement from the community health center, and we're hoping to get a buy-in from the senior center to be able to provide a place where people can bring their little red boxes back for safe disposal. The whole idea is to make it more convenient and free to take these needles back so we can start capturing more. At this point, we only collect needles at the transfer station, and we estimate that we only get about 40% of all the needles that are used in home settings in this county. So we have a lot of room for improvement, and that summarizes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from,
This is for all of 2?
this is for all of 2.1 through 2.6.
Yeah, I had some basic questions about the grants on 2.5. There was a $400,000 grant that ends next month, or in April. And if I read it correctly, it shows $360,000 spent in professional services. What were those professional services?
Excuse me. The contract for the professional services, it's one contract with a nonprofit organization called the California Product Stewardship Council.
California what?
The California Product Stewardship Council. And if you look at the latter part of that report, I think that I put the financial information on the front part. But if you look at the attachment to that, starts with the CPSC Del Norte HD18 Outreach Grant. There is a summary, an overview of all the activities that have happened under that grant attached to the program. I'd be happy to go through that in detail if you want, but those are the activities. In an overview, the California Product Stewardship Council is a statewide organization. Their purpose is to expand awareness and support for product stewardship, which is the idea of, like we do with the batteries, where we take them back at the retail level in Del Norte County, like we're doing with the Sharps to try to get more take back. The idea is to expand more convenient take back for especially the hazardous products that we are struggling with disposing of. And later we'll talk about fluorescent tubes, for example, those kinds of products that are very expensive and hazardous. There was an awards program that was set up to recognize businesses that are taking steps in the right direction. There was funding to provide technical assistance to the other cities and counties that are looking at these as issues, and there was a pilot program for needles, which I just referred to as part of the funding. Part of all of those things has been coordinated through or with the support of California Product Stewardship Council.
So the $105,000 that was remaining, is that correlating to the reimbursement request for $98,000 made on February 6th?
The 105, let me get to the financial report. The $105,000, that is the balance remaining in that contract that has not been paid yet. So that would exclude everything up until the end of January. The reimbursement request was covering all of our expenses on this grant from July 2011 through the end of January 2012. And the way that this grant works is we put out the money first and then we request reimbursement, and that most recent reimbursement request was, as you said, was $98,000. So that has been submitted and we will get that money. It's just a matter of when.
I had more general question on the grants. I guess we can look at the $400,000 one. How much money's actually spent in Delaware County? Because I know that the solid waste has gotten 2.3 or 2.4 million worth of grants, but how much actually of that 2.395 is actually spent in Delaware County?
I think that's a good general question. I don't have a specific answer, but I have a general answer for you. And every chance we have, we spend money locally. That's our first stop.
Sure. Well, let's use the $400,000 grant, for example,
Well,
the current one.
The-
How much of
the
that?
contractor is primarily outside of this county. The promotional information, the portion that we have to spend on advertising and promotion, all the radio ads will be spent here, all the newspaper ads will be spent here. The truck signs were made at Design Graphics, which is a local company. The brochures were not printed here because we don't have a local printer. In fact, we talked to Design Graphics, and she said, just cut me out and find a printer somewhere else, because we don't actually have, she farms everything out, so she's a subcontractor on that. So on the advertising, most of it's spent locally. On the outreach, it's mostly consultants that are not local, but all the work is statewide, so maybe that's not a fair comparison. On the smaller grants, the beverage container grants and the oil grants, a good chunk of money on those is spent on advertising, so that's local newspaper and that's local radio. There are things we buy with the oil grant, like the oil drain containers, which is a specialized product that people can put into their cars to drain the oil and collect it up and bring it in for recycling. Those are not made here, so those are purchased outside the county.
So the way I'm reading the grant, the way you've got it broke down is, of the $400,000 grant, $21,000 is going to be spent to offset payroll here, is that correct?
The total, that's...
$20,993?
That's correct, Mike.
Okay, so that would technically be local. On
Yeah.
that.
For
That's
6
me and Ted.
months,
We're very local.
July through January.
And then 6787, which is the advertising budget.
Yes.
Okay, so the majority of the grant goes outside the area.
In this case, that's true, Mike. Yes.
Well, and I'm just looking for clarification. It's because to say we bring in this money, it doesn't actually come here. It gets spent elsewhere, which is fine for the rest of the state of California. But I'd like to get, at some point, maybe the next meeting or the following meeting, is what percentage of the grants are actually being spent in Delaware County, what dollar amount? Because I think it's misleading to say there's $2.3 million coming in or $2.4 million through the Solid Waste Management Authority. It's not being spent here. So it's being funneled through solid waste to be spent elsewhere. And not to say that, let me reuse the verb, or rephrase the verb. It's basically being brought here and then being spent elsewhere.
I don't think we've said anything that was misleading.
Well, it says $2.3 million have been acquired in grants. It gives the impression.
Those are the
that
grants that we've
2.3
applied for.
Yeah, and it gives the impression that 2.4 million is being spent in Delaware County. It's not.
I don't think we said or implied that, but I apologize if you got that impression.
Well, I think the city and the county both get grants where we spend it on outside sources. And it comes to the city of Crescent City, and we hire companies from outside the area to do specific things that can't be done here. So I don't think we can single out Solid Waste Authority that they're bringing in $2 million in grants and not spending it here. I think it's something that's just a nature of doing business in a small area, but the city and the county both get grants that aren't spent right here in Delaware County.
No, I understand
Totally.
that, but the majority of the grant money, and I don't, it's not spent here. So that's, I guess that's my point, and I don't get that out of the sentence. I get is we're acquiring $2.4 million, but $2.4 million is not being spent on Delaware County.
It was $2.4 million that we don't have to come up with from taxpayers
So we can spend it elsewhere.
here.
The product stewardship grant, $400,000, is not anything closely related to like the oil grant that we received and hazardous cleanup. Those are different types of grant. This grant was designed specifically to look at products that come into California that cost local entities disposal rates that are expensive. And that's where we were able to put our brand on the map, was because by being engaged with product stewardship, being able to get the grant, it put our rural community as one of the pilot communities. So when something is tested, like the battery collection program, for instance. When something is tested, it's tried here, and we get to see if it works. The carpet project is another example. When it's tried here, it gets to work. But these projects and the Sharps, these kind of programs are not just designed out of independent communities trying to make a plan on how to deal with these hazardous waste items, but it's actually a statewide network of cities and counties. If you look at all the members, all the cities and counties that have signed on that want to start becoming part of this to take care of this waste stream issue, we, because of our positioning with the grant, get to see how it works for us, because I think that we consider ourselves many times unique in the distance we are from another urban area, in the small nature of our community, and that kind of thing. And that's what this is about. The fluorescent lights came originally where, you know, you see, there was the question last month, well, how come business doesn't pay? Prior to us figuring out a way to get the lights at a small fee to the transfer station, local companies had to store those themselves until they had a box full of fluorescents that they had to ship off somewhere. So, I know, but I'm just trying to point out that if you want to look at the grants, you have to ask yourself what grant you're looking at. And this is a pass-through grant. It's kind of like when we get a pass-through grant at the county. I mean, we sometimes have money that goes to consultants that are in Sacramento. The admin stays here, and the benefit comes to us. And this benefit is coming back to us as being able to participate in defining how hazardous waste is picked up in rural counties.
Well, I guess my questions originate from the sentence that's in here. It says fiscal impact. Since its formation in 92, the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority has obtained over $2.395 million in grants from private foundations, federal state agencies, an average of over $133,000 per year for the past 18 years. That doesn't tell me what the fiscal impact is. It just says you acquired money. Well, how did that fiscally impact the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority? How did that fiscally impact Del Norte County in the process? That's my question. So it's, if anything, it's an incomplete piece of information. You just say you acquired them. It doesn't give me a breakdown. It doesn't tell me a lot, actually. It tells me very little.
Anything else from commissioners?
Yes, I do. 2.5, on the organization and events presentations, did we do any of those, or those all do in their area? All the 57 of them that have taken place, the events? Who makes those presentations?
Predominantly contractors.
Okay. Have we done any of those?
To Humboldt.
That's furthest? Okay. So it's part of the CPSC?
Right.
They do it, okay.
And to be clear, sometimes there are issues that we can't solve by ourselves. We're very small, we're very isolated, we're very rural, but when we join together with other cities and counties and we have a common purpose, then our benefit is having other partners, other allies to help move legislation or move policy or keep track of regulations as they're being developed. And so when we partner up as a partner with the California Product Stewardship Council, we're associated with large cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco and Sacramento, which have far more resources than we do, both to develop programs and to track regulations and legislation. We're a very small voice, but when we organize and coordinate big grants like this, the benefit comes back to us indirectly. And it may not be easy to put a dollar amount on that, but the purpose is for a local benefit.
Two questions. On the 133,000 that we've averaged over the past 18 years, is there a breakdown someplace showing what happened to those $133,000?
Well, that's the average, so there's not a breakdown on the average. There's lots of details on all the grants that we've received over the years, up to that number.
Second question, I see you represent solid waste on the board of directors of the California Product Stewardship Council. Does anybody else from this area also attend, or are they on the board of directors as well?
No. Just me.
Okay.
I have a quick question, if I could. This is really pretty easy. I'm looking at the grant ending, the large grant, the HD 18 grant ending in April, just a couple of months from now. Is there going to be another cycle? Do you have any idea if there'll be?
On this?
Will there be additional grant cycles that we can apply for, or is this it?
Well, I'd have to say this is it. The funding source is drying up. This comes from Cal Recycle, and all their funding comes from a portion of a fee on all the tipping fees of all the landfills in California. And that revenue, just like our disposal revenue, is down a bit. Statewide, their revenue is also down, so they're really ratcheting back on the household hazardous waste grants. We have gotten 3 out of the last 5 cycles we've gotten this grant. This is a competitive discretionary grant. We get them because Ted's a very good grant writer, and in the case of California Product Stewardship Council, this is the second grant that we've gotten to work with CPSC. So just in the product stewardship area, we've gotten 2 grants equaling over $700,000. And the grant before that actually built a building to store reusable appliances. So it was a building that was built at the transfer station. And I don't know if you would consider them local, but the low bid that we selected to construct that was a Brookings-based company.
Okay, thank you. I just was hopeful that there'd be more grant dollars.
No.
Thank
Sadly, no, we're going to be on our own after this.
Mr. Schlong, did you have something?
Mister?
Commissioner
Oh,
Schlong, did you have something?
I was just going to say that I think that David Finnegan is a good example of putting your mark on the map coming from a small county when he gets involved in the rural counties projects. I don't know a lot about it, but I know that he's become involved in a lot more on a statewide level, and that provides him the voice to bring Del Norte County and the city of Crescent City concerns to a forefront. And I think that's kind of the same thing that we're doing by being involved in the California product stewardship, by allowing us to say, you know, what you're doing in LA or Sacramento is a lot different than how it affects Del Norte County. So I think if we can get a grant to be involved in those things, it can only be a good thing.
That's fine. My initial concern was, out of these 57 presentations, that our representatives were traveling all over the state to make these presentations, so I'm glad you clarified that.
We don't have.
Because I'm saying, oh, wait a minute.
He doesn't have enough time.
I'm not so sure that's our.
No, and in fact,
objective here.
the majority of the board meetings, we have monthly board meetings with the Product Stewardship Council. The majority of my participation on that is over the internet and on the phone. So I don't even travel for the board meetings most of the time.
I got to tell you, my concerns, and I think I asked you to come up with the amount of time that staff spends on these grants as a whole. It concerns me because, like you said, the money's going to start drying up, but staff is still going to be here. So are we spending an inordinate amount of time on these grants? And why is it that Del Norte County, who was just a drop in the little bucket, spearheading all of these? I mean, why are we the guinea pigs on some of these programs when you said it yourself, LA County has a lot more money than we do? Not that we want to deal with our garbage the way they deal with it, but why aren't we part of the follow-up process rather than spearheading? So there's several questions in there, and I don't know where you want to start. Time, I think, is the biggest concern.
Predominantly, we keep track of the time that's billable to the grants. So I'm not sure that I could give you a complete report on how much time we spend that isn't billable. If you look at the amount that's budgeted out of these grants, the $20,000 Mike already commented on for the household hazardous waste grant is reimbursable time. And on the oil grant, we can claim 3,000 or 1/5 of that whole grant. We bill staff time to that. And on the beverage container grant, I think we were able to bill up to $4,000. So we try to grab a fair amount of money out of those grants to reimburse for staff time. But I think the important thing to remember in all three grants, in all three cases, we're trying to manage products that are, this is something we would have to do anyway. If we didn't get the grant, we would still have to have, it would be still part of our responsibility representing this community to have a place for oil to be recycled, to promote that and to help people do that. Same thing with beverage containers, to help people recycle more. And in the case of the product stewardship or issue, they're the most difficult, most expensive products that we have to deal with. And household batteries, for example, I'll shift into the second part of your question. Why did we volunteer for that? Because household batteries, among a whole long list of things, have been banned from disposal in the garbage. So we have an obligation to try to develop programs where we can help people figure that out. It's been a couple years. The reason we were able to get a pilot program here and we were able to get the Battery Stewardship Corporation to do a little pilot here is because we're small. My pitch was, we're pretty small, it won't cost you very much, and you can learn something. So help us get this program set up. So they started with a one-year program, and it worked out so well that they continue to fund this now several years later. We're the one of two jurisdictions in all of California that has take-back programs on the retail level, at the level that we have. So we benefit by being aggressive and staying out in front of this, and when there's resources that can help complement or supplement what we have to do anyway, whether that's reimbursement for staff time or in some way supplementing the funding that we have to provide these services, then that's what we try to do.
So
if we didn't have the grants, we would still be spending time on this, but it wouldn't be reimbursed.
So can solid waste survive without the grants?
Yes. Well, that's a very large question. Financially?
Yes.
We will adjust. Yes.
And
whether that all works out is subject to a number of issues which I think you're familiar with. The diminishing disposal fees. There are certainly have been questions raised in the last several years regarding the continued operation of this organization. So will we survive? I don't know.
Mr. Chair, I think I would have a request of staff for the next meeting to actually give us the fiscal impact of the grants. I'd like to know where the money's being spent in terms of if it's being spent locally, if it's being spent out of area, and not to go back 18 years, but last 3 years I think should, 2 to 3 years should be adequate enough, and how much staff time percentage-wise is being spent on grant work. Because the question that I have is the same question, is without those grants, because there's, for example, in this one, there's $20,000 of wages and benefits that are being offset with the grant. The question is, if the grants run out, which there's a strong possibility a lot of them are going to, due to the state of the economy locally or statewide, then would we be able to survive financially as an organization, as the Solid Waste Management Authority? So I'd like a fiscal impact instead of one sentence I'd like more detail.
Commissioner Finnegan.
For me, it's a little bit of
Or
a different
Mr.
twist, too. And then I think we'll get the same information, but I would like to use it a different way. I want to see if the money that you're gleaning off of grants are helping, understanding that it's either reducing expenditures or raising revenues. So if it's raising revenues to help offset the cost, I'm looking at it from the point of view of the users. My responsibility here is to provide the services and the education, but at the least expensive financial impact to the users. So if what you're doing is, I guess I'm looking at the other side of it. If you're not doing it and we have to pay, the only way we get to pay is to either reduce expenditures or raise revenues, and if we have to charge our people more, well, then it's a good thing, that what you're doing, okay? And if by what you're doing, if it's offsetting costs to where we can reduce rates to the users, that's the angle I want to see. And if we're doing that, then that's a good thing. So that's the bottom line for me.
I would just like to add to that it was, think, I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago, we got a list that had about 30 or 40 things that had been declared as hazardous waste. But the state didn't come with a plan on how to get rid of that. It was only, these things will no longer be allowed in a landfill. And if we don't figure out incremental steps on how we pull that out of the landfill, then the operators, either the collector has to tell people, you can't put that in my can, and the transfer person has to say, you can't put this in the transfer station. And what happens is it backs up. I don't know if people remember, but there was a period of time, we had a whole couple of shoeboxes full at my house of batteries, because you weren't allowed to put the batteries in the landfill. Now, some people may just blow that off and say, well, I'm just going to throw mine in anyway, but you can see the ramifications of that, because the responsibility falls, well, it falls back to us, but it falls on the people who transfer it and the people who collect it. And so there's things that have been pulled out of the landfills, and that's when the discussion of product stewardship, for instance, the cute little shoes that children wear that light up, those are not supposed to land in the landfill. But that's way down on the food chain as far as what we're trying to pull out. We looked at batteries and thought that might be easy. We looked at sharps, thought that might be good. You know, so it's trying to look at those things and reduce that and figure out ways so people aren't sitting on top of this stuff in their garages.
Anything else from commissioners? Public comment. I'm going to open this up for public comment on the director's report only at this time.
Mary Wilson. Yes, hello. I wanted to go over the grants. I just had a chance to take a look at the big grants. Basically, the $400,000 grant, there was $328,000 spent on personnel. Of that, $21,000 was spent here in Del Norte. The majority of the money went out to Berkeley Associates, LZ, environmental, subcontractors. Again, $71,000 was on travel expense, and $328,000 of that grant was spent on personnel. $20,000 of that here in Del Norte County. And the HD 16 grant, it was a $300,000 grant. Again, $229,000 of that grant was spent on personnel. Out of $300,000, $230,000 spent on personnel. And pretty much the same percentages spent out of the area. So, but the real thing is what is the real goal of the grant? And if you really go in here, they will put forward their goal, I'm reading right from the work plan here, is to build knowledge, local governments, retailers, and to start a transition from government-managed finance product end-of-life system to producer-managed finance end-of-life system. This is, again, they call it in here cradle to grave. So they want to have the producers responsible for the trash. In one of their own reports, too, it's been mentioned a couple times that this information, the conclusion is when they put these programs together, is that it's not effective. These grants aren't effective. They're not really changing behavior. And so what they come up with is this project documents the need for statewide mandatory product stewardship of lamps, batteries on this one grant. So by getting these grants, they're making they're getting, I don't know if you want to call it evidence, or putting together a study on why we should have statewide legislation. So that's something that really should be discussed. It's being pushed again by staff, and have we had that discussion? Is that something? It's a political agenda that's being put forward, and that discussion really needs to be had by the board. Do you want to have the government manage that more, push it on to the businesses? Within their own report, they state here, Radio Shack decided that they tried to get Duracell, who brands their own batteries, to design a nationwide take-back program, but the response was that this would drive up the prices of the batteries by 30%, more than any other batteries if they had to take back those batteries. So no, Dave, it wouldn't reduce the cost to the consumers, it would increase the cost to the consumers. So again, it's not just the fact of, oh, it's free money. We need to take a look at the goal of these grants. Who's decided this? Is that what you want? And is that here in Del Norte County, with our limited resources, do we want to be out around the state of California pushing this forward when we need to be taking care of business at home? So again, I'll get into a little bit later when we look at the finances, but here's the solid waste that we've been bailing out, these past few years, and here they're going off doing projects like this. You need to take a look at that. I'm tired of the bailouts. I just want to live within our means and do what we need to have a good, solid community, and again, provide a good service to the customers. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, then we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Oops.
This is one of the items that got carried over from the last month, and when I had a meeting with Jerry, Jerry asked for some financial information, some cost information on fluorescence. So Ted's got just a brief PowerPoint, which you can assume you all have enough screens you can look, follow along.
Okay. At the previous meeting, we were asked to provide some cost details on fluorescent tubes as received at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. Current rates are household fluorescents are received at no charge. Commercial compact fluorescents are received for $1.62. 4-foot fluorescent tubes are $3.22 each, and commercial 8-foot fluorescent tubes are $6.44 each. So in 2011, we received 435 household fluorescents, 56 compact fluorescents from commercial business, 340 4-foot fluorescent commercial tubes, and 26 8-foot fluorescent commercial tubes. Now, the way that Hambro Waste Solutions Groups pays for the processing of these is on the linear foot of the fluorescent tube, so there's not a direct comparison, but it's close because not all fluorescent tubes that are brought in are 4-foot or 8-foot. Some are intermediate lengths. So operations, transport, and recovery. Right now, Hambro Waste Solutions Group is only being paid for the commercial tubes that are managed. Their gross income for all of the commercial tubes for 2011 at the current rates is about $900. The cost to manage these materials in 2011 is about $2,286. That's about 250% of the gross income received for the fluorescent tubes. And were all the fluorescent tubes to be charged at the same rate, assuming that we had a similar mix of the household tubes compared to the commercial tubes, they would have received a gross income of $1,827, or only approximately 80% of the cost to manage those materials. So things to consider when looking at these policies are, first of all, how did we get here? Generally, the authority board has had a policy that the most common household hazardous materials should be received at the primary facility for no charge to reduce the potential for these hazardous materials to be illegally disposed or dumped. The Transfer Station Operations Agreement implemented that policy and specified that the household fluorescent tubes and bulbs would be accepted without charge every day the facility is opened by Hambro WSG, and those operations began in March 2005. In 2006, fluorescent tubes and bulbs, in addition to a variety of other mercury devices, were banned from mixed waste disposal. And broken fluorescent tubes release hazardous mercury vapor. So change order number 8, which was adopted in November '07, established service fees for commercial fluorescents subject to annual CPI adjustments. So what can be done? Clearly, there was discussed interest in trying to make this free for everybody, but the challenges are, of course, that if you reduce the charge somewhere, then if you're going to be revenue neutral, then those revenues need to be raised from some other fee. or that revenue has to come from somewhere. So providing any additional service for no charge will require additional direction from the board to make such action revenue neutral. A change order would also be required with Hambro WSG, and an ordinance would need to be established, assuming that rates would increase to offset the decrease in charges. Staff believe that the authority should continue to support extended producer responsibility legislation for fluorescent tubes, as with other hazardous materials that have been banned from mixed waste disposal.
Okay, so, and how's that coming?
Which, the
producer?
producer responsibility for fluorescent tubes is particularly challenging. The reason why the costs are so expensive is essentially they need to be transported without breaking the bulbs. So you're shipping a very low-density material, and it's fragile, and it's hazardous. So all those things considered make trying to recycle these things very, very expensive. The Air Resources Control Board has not approved any mechanism to crush the glass on site or to recover the vapor, because the folks doing so would be exposed to the mercury. So we've tried to create a system where we're not giving incentives to do the wrong thing. That's why the household tubes.
Let me comment on that, Jerry. The legislation, first of all, backing up a little bit, I know there's 10 of you now, but some of you were here before. So the concept of product stewardship was approved by this board. The resolution supporting it was approved by this board. The joining the California Product Stewardship Council was approved by this board. The grants have been approved by this board. And occasionally legislation is supported by this board. One of the bills that was supported last year is the paint stewardship bill, which got passed and will provide take back for paint. Fluorescent tubes are high on the list for the California Product Stewardship Council to get some more meaningful take back. And the idea is if the businesses capture the cost as a part of the sales price, then only the consumers are paying rather than the general ratepayer. And the people that buy the tubes prepay for the disposal of those tubes, so that when they're done, there's a system set up that's more convenient, affordable, and easy.
Okay, can you go back to your previous slide? Now, would you consider this program, maybe you have to go back to the next slide. Would you consider this program a success? 26 8-foot fluorescent bulbs? Would that tell you what? Commercial, if you think that's a success, that you got to collect on 26.
I don't think Ted's suggesting that it's a success. It's a statement of fact. It's statistics.
Well, but what he said later on was that it was an incentive to make sure that these don't get disposed of improperly.
For the households, yes.
But not for the businesses.
Well, here's the policy that we're talking about, Jerry. When the transfer station contract was put out, reviewed and approved by this board, we asked the transfer station operator to subsidize the cost of fluorescent tubes for residences, for households. Household quantities are therefore free because it was part of the plan going into this. After that contract was approved, the board directed that, because at that point we did not collect commercial quantities of fluorescent tubes. We didn't provide that service. The board wanted to have that service. We asked the private company that works for us to give us a price, and that's the basis for the price, is based on the cost for Hambro to handle those fluorescent tubes. We don't want that local business to lose money at the expense of other local businesses, so that's the balance we're trying to find. And if that, and more importantly probably, is that there are options for mail-back containers for fluorescent tubes, and a lot of businesses take advantage of that, where you pre-buy a box, you slide the tubes in, it's sent by common carrier back to a place that can be recovered. So a lot of businesses use that, and that's probably more convenient, the most convenient, if not, and I can't even say that it's less expensive than what we offer, but it's a service that's not exclusive to, it's not the only place, the only game in town.
Well, I just have to think that because of the charge to businesses is the reason that you're only getting 26 commercial fluorescent tubes, 8-foot commercial tubes.
If it was free, we'd probably get more.
I would think. So what's happening to those?
No, most of them probably are tossing them.
You believe that our businesses would?
I think, well, I have an issue with kind of the disturbing trend that I'm seeing on these ordinances and stuff that we're passing, is it's all put on the business owner. Why is that? I mean, if the philosophy is that we're trying to take this out of the waste stream, why are we dumping it all on the local businesses? These aren't the producers of the fluorescent bulbs, these are the users. Why aren't we spreading the costs out a little bit more to make it more economical across the board?
Well, maybe we could also ask Cambro if they're seeing a large amount of tubes in the garbage. No?
So they're doing a good job.
They're dumping them somewhere else. I have a question.
I'm just curious.
May I ask a question? You know, I'm just finding out now that you're just saying now that the contract with Recology included the free,
No, the contract with Hambro,
includes the
the
free,
transfer station contract,
includes the free for households, for fluorescents.
household quantities.
How's that affect, say, my household that has no fluorescents, and several, I'm sure there's many that have no fluorescents, so I'm subsidizing that with my bill? How much of my bill is that for, I don't have fluorescents in my home.
You
You're going to have to sometime, because they don't make incandescents anymore.
Yeah, the
Oh, I thought,
compact.
all of them, not just the tubes. That's what I was talking about.
Well,
Okay, so we'll all have them.
Do you mean your
I thought they were talking about just the two.
Recology bill?
Yeah.
tubes and the compact fluorescents.
I take it back. I guess I'll have them all very soon. All right.
Well, but you do raise an important point, which is if, for example, there was somebody that didn't use fluorescent lamps at all, and they were garbage customers, then some very small portion of that garbage rate would be going to subsidize the cost of handling fluorescent tubes.
But we'll all be using fluorescent tubes shortly, so.
And so, the idea of consumer-based fees is that when you buy the tube, you pay the fee when you buy the tube. So only the consumers of that product are paying the cost of it rather than spreading that cost across. Now, Mike asked, well, why is it the way it is? It's the way it is because that's the direction this board has taken, and this board has the option to take a different direction. And that's why we brought this up, so that you could discuss whether you want to do something different. I'm just providing the background. When we entered into a contract with Hambro, they were required to subsidize the cost of fluorescent tubes. That was the starting point. When the board discovered or decided that there was no outlet or no place in town that could take business tubes, then the staff were directed to develop a rate for fluorescent tubes from businesses. It wasn't a conspiracy or any sort of attempt to.
No, I'm not accusing of a conspiracy. I just think it's a bad trend that every time.
Well, you're saying it's a bad trend that we're trying to stick it to businesses.
Well, that's what's happening, though.
Well, that may be the outcome that you're seeing, but that's not the direction that this board provided. It wasn't the direction that we had when we went into this. It was, we don't have a service. We should at least provide a service for the cost that it takes to handle that. And so the cost we have was set by our private contractor. It's the cost that they have to handle these tubes. And if that's their cost, then saying it should be cheaper doesn't make it cheaper unless we have a different strategy on how to handle this. And so that's why we look at product stewardship, because there are certain products like this that are just so expensive, and they are hazardous, and they are banned from disposal, and we could decide that we don't want to have anything to do with them and just trust the market to take care of it. I don't think that would happen.
Well, I think we do have to address it now, but I think the idea of just loading it on top of the businesses is the wrong approach. I think what we need is.
We didn't do that.
Well, you did, because the businesses pay for it, and the
businesses
residential
are
don't.
Because there's a cost.
The price.
Well, what is
that
the cost
private
if it's
companies
spread out
set-
among residentials as well as commercial?
Well, you have the option to make that decision.
What is that cost?
We can do that.
Hey,
It's-
I'll argue the other side of that coin with you, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
If I use 6 fluorescent bulbs in my one-bedroom house, why should I be paying for Walmart's disposal of thousands of lights?
Well, if they're paying a per light disposal, they're going to pay based on the volume that they dispose of.
If that were the system, but that isn't the current system.
Well, then that would be the question of asking if you're going to dispose
And
of.
the reason that the current system was set up was that commercial fluorescent light users had an avenue to get rid of their lights. They had the boxes to put the lights in. And then we started getting these compact bulbs. We started getting some houses with the small ones. And it was like, where do they go? You know, because how long does it take to fill up one of those boxes that holds, they hold a lot when they ship them back. And here as a home consumer, it's going to, you know, so why can't we offer them a place to do it for the $900 a year? You know what I'm saying? It's like trying to make sure they stay out of the waste stream, trying to develop this, and it's like, I think every one of us buy tires, and now I would guess that the majority of us don't blink at the $5 surcharge or whatever it is that's on that tire that allows me that when I go back and get my tire changed, the tire company keeps it, and there's a that's the end of life responsibility. I paid for it coming in because I was the consumer.
No, I
That's what-
understand that part, and
Oh, okay.
until that happens, the
But you have
question
to
is
do
how
it
do you spread
incrementally.
the,
You have to
But
figure
Yeah, but
out-
why wouldn't you spread the
would
cost out
looking
over more
at it
people?
When you have to dispose of a fluorescent bulb.
Because they were so small pieces for the consumer, it would take them, you know, a storage area before, because they take it by linear foot and they buy it back in such a way that it's not like I
No,
could
that's-
just
that's
take my
not-
light bulb
But
and
you can
put it
take
in a
it down to
box
the
and
transfer
send it
station
back.
for so much money. You can take it down to the transfer station.
And
for
you
so
pay
much
the
money.
fee of
And you pay
disposing
the fee
your
just
fluorescent
like you pay
bulb.
for with your tires.
a per bulb.
Just like businesses pay for with their tires. Just like everybody else does. Or just, why are we excluding? I mean, I understand that we're, trying to take it out of the waste stream.
We're trying to pull hazardous waste out of the waste stream.
But not for
Exactly.
businesses.
Yes, for businesses.
Well,
And yes,
why wouldn't you spread
businesses
the?
are being asked to pay.
I think we're saying the same thing. We're just, our question that we're bringing up is why
You
isn't
know,
the
maybe
cost
you should
factor?
write a letter of why we should charge all the residents in town.
Well, your businesses are diminishing as we speak. There's not enough business base to continue to heap things on top of them at the sake of having it free for the consumers.
You go back to the amount of money that's collected by Hambros for the home,
$900.
$900.
That's, well, I mean, you're both right, if I may say that it's not very much. No, that's not a successful program. Where they're going, we like to believe that businesses are all going to be responsible, and they're going to use the mail-back containers, or they're going to drop them off, and they're not going to put them in the garbage, because not only will they put themselves at risk, they'll put the garbage workers at risk, and that's what we don't want. So we want to have the best, most equitable system possible. You can criticize that the system we have right now is not perfect. I would agree with that, Mike. It's not. But the question in front of you now is, what do you want to do different? Because if you want to make it free for businesses, then that money has to come from someplace. It comes from, and the only place we get money from is from tipping fees. So I'm not sure what you're suggesting, but I'd welcome any ideas
I'm
you
looking
have.
at the suggestion of a per bulb fee. If you're going to
At the retail level?
No, I would, until that producer responsibility thing is passed legislatively.
So
I
charging
would be
residents
looking-
also?
Yeah. Spread the cost, what would the cost be?
That's an option.
I mean, without knowing the numbers, it's tough to say
If
if
we were
that's,
setting a per bulb fee, then it would be based on the actual cost of disposal. That would be easy to calculate. That would be a politically difficult decision, maybe. It may not result in the
Depends on
outcome
what the
that we're
number
looking
is.
for, because if we're not satisfied with the participation because businesses are being charged and we think they're not coming to us, charging residents, I think, would have the same effect. We may see fewer of them. and
I think
that
they're
may
just
not be
storing in the back room.
The alternative would be to make it free for everybody. And that is harder, because it would be hard to calculate how many bulbs Walmart's going to have next time they swap out all their fluorescents.
You know, that was a question I had. Do we know what the businesses are doing right now, the large businesses with their fluorescent bulbs? I think we think that they're sending them back, packaging them up and sending them back. Maybe they have a company that comes and does that for them.
Well, because
Could staff just check with them? It shouldn't take very long to find out what
to
do
talk
you
to every
do?
business in the county?
The big business.
The big businesses.
Well, we were just at Walmart because they're doing a remodel, and what they do is they collect them up in boxes and they ship them off with their own hazardous waste contractor. That's the biggest business, and we know that because Ted and I were just there for a pre-construction demolition workshop on,
What's their cost per bulb there?
What are they,
What's their cost?
what are they paying?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's not, it's their business, it's not our business. It's their business to take care of their own waste, and they're doing that. So we didn't ask them how much it cost. It was actually a small portion of the whole meeting. It was about, in their construction project, the county put a condition that they need to have a waste plan, and we were reviewing that waste plan. And clearly, they had a plan for dealing with all their hazards, and Walmart in particular is very sensitive because apparently they got dinged and fined and
It might be
slammed.
interesting to know, I mean, it'd be interesting to ask.
I can say I certainly, as a resident, don't want to pay for Walmart's disposal costs.
If you're doing a per bulb cost, you are not paying for Walmart's cost of disposal of bulbs. You're paying for whatever you dump bulb-wise.
You know, alternatively, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Mike, because I think to the extent you want a pure system, everybody pays the actual cost of the service they're getting. It's hard to get to that pure system, but
Well, the
We started with the
businesses
policies
that
that
deal
we
with
have.
it need to make a profit too, though.
Hmm?
The businesses to stay in business that are handling this need to make a profit as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, presumably, Hambro's at least covering the cost of handling these, and I'm not sure they're making a lot of profit because it's a fairly small portion of everything they do. But I just wanted to say that
If we start taking-
you could, this board could, and other places have, adopted local ordinances. San Luis Obispo adopted a local ordinance that says, if you sell fluorescent lamps, you will take them back as part of your business. And those retail businesses have adjusted so that the price of the lamps includes the cost of taking back those lamps. That's a pure across the board. We don't care if you're a business or a residence. If you buy a fluorescent lamp from us, the cost of disposal is included, and when you're done, you take it back to the same place you bought it. That's not pure extended producer responsibility, but it is product stewardship in the sense that the retailer is making money selling these, take a position of having those boxes so that you as the consumer can take it back to the same, when your bulb breaks, you take it back to the retailer, they take it, they store it, they handle it. That's a cost of their doing business. And the businesses that are doing that in San Luis Obispo, it's working fine. But that started with an ordinance saying everybody has to do it, because if you make it a suggestion, some stores will do it, some stores will not do it, and it needs to be a level playing field so every retailer is on a same equal competitive footing. So that's a real possible, legitimate outcome of this. If you want to have everybody pays the cost when they buy it, that's an option you have in front of you. As well
I know
as-
that also for years there's a guy, his name is Neil. I think his business is called Superior Lamps.
Neil Goodman?
Yeah, he's been around here for like forever, I think. And he goes in and he replaces your bulbs and he takes the ones that aren't working anymore. So I'm sure that each business that utilizes his lamps pays for that as well, for him to take them, to dispose of them, I'm guessing.
Well, he's a business, like Hambro's a business, like the businesses that generate the tubes. Everybody has to have a business that at least doesn't lose money if they want to stay in business. So our contractor is in the same footing. You can't, I don't believe they would agree. You can ask, but I don't believe that they would agree to take unlimited quantities of fluorescent tubes without having some way to be compensated for that cost. So either everybody pays, or everybody pays directly per unit, or everybody pays indirectly through disposal costs, or we shift the view of this and shift in favor of retail-based product take-back, which is the trend that's coming forward, where every consumer and only that consumer of that product pays the cost. Not the people that don't use fluorescents or the people that want to continue to use incandescents, because, you know, Jerry, you'll still be able to find them someplace, those incandescent bulbs. We'll import them from Canada for you if we have to.
Texas, I think, was talking about.
Texas?
Texas was
Yeah.
talking about making some.
So,
I would like to find out a little more information on this, if you could find out from San Luis Obispo what they figure their per bulb, per foot, or whatever cost.
costs are?
What their costs are. If you could request that from Walmart or Home Depot on what they do with their bulbs and how much that costs
Ed, are
them.
you taking notes?
Yes.
Please do.
I'd like to have that information so that we know what they're doing with them. I mean, there must be some reason that they're not taking them to Hambro's. must be getting rid of them cheaper someplace else.
Hey, we can do a sampling of businesses to see what they're doing with their tubes. And I can get you that information from San Luis Obispo. They're very easy to work with.
Great.
They're proud of what they've done, and it's working well for them, so I'm
Good.
sure they'll tell us what they're doing.
Wouldn't their costs be different than what it would be here?
Might be.
Probably.
It might be, but still.
Find out what they do with them and how much it costs them to do whatever they do with them.
Sure.
Where they have to go. I mean, you're talking about transportation costs have got to be the biggest costs, is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, our tubes go to Southern California.
Yeah.
You know, and the issue, thinking back to Commissioner Ania's initial comment, and that all the bulbs are going to be this type of bulb, I mean, this could be a very large issue in the future. We're not talking about tubes now, we're talking about light bulbs, basically. And so, are we going to charge per light bulb?
And to be clear, why do we care? Because we have an obligation to keep these out of the garbage. That's where our obligation starts from,
Exactly.
because it exposes our garbage workers, our collection workers, our transfer station workers, and unknowing residents who choose to break their tubes and put them in the garbage. It exposes them even if they don't do it. So, there's the issue.
David?
It strikes me as it's sort of a flawed system.
Yeah.
If you're charging coast to coast or Walmart, or putting an extra cost to the consumer to buy something that, quite frankly, they're not going to take back to that store, they have a history of not taking it back, where's that money going? I mean, and nobody's talking about the producer. If the producer is charged up front, and then the producer has to set up his trust account to where then when I take my light bulbs to solid waste management for no cost, you bill the producer and the producer reimburses you.
That would be better.
Yeah.
No, it's a flawed system, to be sure.
Yeah.
A retail-based take-back is only a halfway step, and examples, and you just approved it, and you just acknowledged it was a good thing. Carpet take-back. Here's an example where you pay some pennies when you buy the carpet, that goes into a fund managed by the producers, and they pay for the cost of transporting that carpet and recycling it when it gets out of your paint stewardship.
What I'm
Same
looking to
thing.
do is get the business owner, and I'm not looking at Walmart as much as I'm looking at maybe even Rite Aid or maybe Pacific, what used to be Pacific Drug, I guess, and looking at coast to coast. I go in and buy a light bulb. I guarantee you that the amount of bulbs that return to these stores is negligible. And why?
They don't take them back. They don't take them back.
They don't sit on it.
Okay, but what you're talking about is charging the consumer more, so they are going to be forced to take it back. They shouldn't be in the equation.
Well, they're fundamental questions that you get to answer. Who should pay?
So I guess you hit the nail on the head. It's a policy discussion that
Bingo.
we can take care of at this level.
And I'll take your direction. I will get you the information you're asking for. I will get the information from San Luis Obispo, because I think their experience is people are taking fluorescent tubes back to the stores. And I think they'll have statistics, because the guy in charge down there is an engineer who loves statistics. So
That's why historic.
he'd be proud to tell us what they're doing.
This group wanted it to reach to producer responsibility, because that takes the business person out of it. Because we know we have to have special handling and special disposal. It's gonna cost more money. So is it, when you buy it as the consumer, or the producer and the consumer, it's in partnership and the consumer has the trust? I mean, the producer, and that's how it gets reimbursed at the local level, because one way or another, the garbage is falling to local government entities.
Well, it's also money. Money is going somewhere other than where it should be going, because I guarantee you those light bulbs are still staying in the waste stream.
Okay, I think we'll put this on as a permanent item, and we'll continue to talk about this at every meeting.
How about we come back with
I'd like to say something, Jerry. if
Sure.
I
permanent item? But, okay,
We-
we'll follow your direction on that.
We can beat this to death in how many different ways we need to dispose of these. I mean, you guys are forgetting about one tiny little thing. How are you going to remember what store you bought that light bulb
I
at?
wasn't forgetting about that.
No,
You know,
exactly.
Are they gonna start having to be required to put their own mark on?
No, I
all their
apologize for the
products?
confusion, that they don't distinguish in San Luis Obispo. You don't have to take it back exactly to the same store. Everybody has to do it. And the theory from a retail level is you're providing a level of service that customer, you're going to generate some loyalty from that customer. The theory on the producer side on why it's better to have the manufacturers, the producers hold that money, because now you've got a much larger system. I mean, it's again back to, here we are, a local, small, isolated county where our expenses are higher than everybody else's. And we're trying to manage a system that is less than perfect, and we can criticize what's wrong with it, but if a business, the larger businesses are coordinating this, there's a great likelihood that they would be able to manage a reverse distribution system that would be far more efficient and far more cost-effective than anything that we could ever set up here. So the advantage of having private enterprise do this is that. The efficiency of private enterprise is a benefit in this case.
Sounds like another grant to work on, huh?
No, we're not writing any more grants because it's just not worth it.
Do we
Just
skip
kidding.
Okay,
2.6?
enough, okay, we're done. We're
Jerry,
done with this.
Do we skip 2.6?
Did we skip what?
I think we did, 2.6.
Well, that was
No, that's
part of
that's
the
part of the
director's
director's report.
Oh, okay. I don't remember.
All
Rick
done
asked
with
that.
that. We're moving on. Moving on to 6.1, discussion possible action regarding the fiscal year 2010, 2011 independent audit.
All right. I don't know if I made this clear when I wrote either the staff report or the agenda item, but what you have in front of you is a draft audit from last fiscal year, and what the auditor is looking for is a response to what they've identified as what they call significant deficiencies, things that need to be improved, and what are we going to do about it. So what I've done is highlighted those for you and summarized, or at least drafted up, suggested responses. In a nutshell, we're struggling with two significant areas of public interest. We consistently, over the last several years, have gotten comments from our auditors saying that we're not generating enough revenue to pay all the fixed costs that we have. All the costs that we have incurred or inherited are related to the landfill, post-closure maintenance, liability related to the landfill, financing of the transfer station, depreciation, all of these things are adding up. So on one hand, we have our external auditors saying our rates are not high enough to pay our costs. And on the other hand, there's a public interest in keeping the rates low. So you have a built-in tension between taking care of the public business on the larger scale and taking care of the individual customer on a smaller scale. So that's, in a nutshell, the nature of what we're trying to juggle here. When we started the transfer station, we tried to keep the rates as low as possible, and it appears they were not high enough to even break even. Starting this year, the proportion of fees going to the Solid Waste Authority increased, and as of now, it seems like we're keeping pace with budget. So it looks like things will get better in the future, but in summary, the recommendation on almost every one of these items is we better start putting some money aside into reserve funds so that we have it both in the event that we can't make a payment to the county on the transfer station financing, or if we can't, if we have to have some repair on the landfill that's unanticipated, we should have some money set aside for that. And in general, we should be setting money aside for depreciation every year with the idea that at some point in the future, there will be either repairs or replacement costs for that transfer station. So my answer for most of this was we should start setting some money aside. You won't know if there is any extra money to set aside till the end of this fiscal year, so all we can say at this point is that the response to these items, as I stated in most of the responses, is that we should consider that at the end of the fiscal year, and that would be under the board's direction to be able to do that. I'll pause for a minute and see if there's any questions.
Well, I think one of the obvious things is to reduce expenses, and the biggest category for expenses is payroll and benefits.
Mr. Dillard had a comment about the blank pages.
Oh, shall I
And-
comment on that?
Well, I was going to comment on it because, I mean, I've seen this before, and the reason that you put this page is intentionally left blank is so that you know you're not missing something.
Right.
So
Right, and it's usually because you
if it was
want-
just a blank page,
the first page has the content, and because when this is produced final, it'll be two-sided.
Right.
And so the first page is the content, and the second side, rather than just having it blank, and then you're wondering, what did I miss? Did something not get copied? It says intentionally left blank.
The actual auditor creates that page.
Yeah, so that's the reason for that. And again, this is a draft audit, so once we give feedback on the, what's called the corrective actions on these deficiencies, then I will transmit that back to our external auditor, and then they will be able to finalize the audit for us.
So in your mid-budget review, that I haven't seen yet, but are you anticipating these monies to be able to set aside?
We did specifically budget $100,000, a little more than $100,000 for depreciation, so that line is specifically in the budget, and it looks like we will have enough to do that. The problem is we have at least three or four different places where it would be nice to have some money set aside. One of them is the landfill, where, basically we're covering our costs year by year out of the tipping fees from the transfer station. Ideally, it would have been better to have, when the landfill was still open, to collect fees adequate enough so that well, ideally, when you're running a landfill, you want to collect fees sufficient to cover closure and post-closure, and private landfills are required to do that. Government-owned landfills, you're allowed to pledge revenue or promise over the next 30 years you'll pay out of revenue from whatever source you have, whether that's taxes or anything. Before I got here, the revenue was not adequate to respond to the enforcement orders from the Water Quality Board and the California Integrated Waste Management Board, so there was a $50 per parcel fee that was adopted, which helped the county, this was again before I got here, helped the county to collect some money to start making the closure plans. And then there was a 5-year half-cent sales tax that was also collected to help pay for the closure costs. And as much as that helped catch up, basically this organization was, in my opinion, was founded as a debt sink. This was a way for the city and the county to have a third agency that could take on that debt, take on that liability. We essentially provide a liability firewall to the city and the county for the landfill because we take the responsibility for doing that. So all of the debt, all the liability got sunk into this disposable agency, and we're doing our best, but when I got here, we were already behind. And I think if you were to look over time, since we have the landfill closed and we're moving through the years in post-closure maintenance, as time goes by, we'll be in better and better shape on this. The depreciation is something I would like to come back and discuss in some more detail at a subsequent meeting, because the schedule for depreciation is based on, especially for the transfer station, the biggest number that we're using for depreciation is the cost of the transfer station. But however it got determined, whether it was the external auditor or the county auditor, that, or whatever rules are defined to determine that, it appears that the number we used for depreciating the landfill included the entire cost of financing. We financed the project through the infrastructure bank, and the entire cost of financing includes the engineering, it included the bond counsel, it included a number of things that have nothing to do with constructing a building. There was $500,000 of that was just land clearing. So there's some expenses that even when the transfer station building needs to be repaired are not reoccurring expenses. And so I think the basis, at least the baseline quantity amount that's used for calculating depreciation is higher than it needs to be. Nevertheless, we still need to start putting money aside. And so this year's budget, we're putting $100,000 aside. If there's extra money to set aside for other purposes, that'll be up to you to determine whether there's enough cash flow available that you can start putting $100,000 a year into a restricted fund.
We had discussed at a previous meeting in terms of the liability of the landfill, and I think you'd mentioned you were going to approach, was it water quality or integrated waste management in regards to reducing our liability?
Yes, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, that's I just wanted to get an
That's your question?
update.
Status?
Yeah.
We haven't heard back yet. So we submitted the letter requesting it. What we asked for was essentially a 20% reduction in post-closure liability. So what you're going to see in this audit is the $2.67 million estimated 30-year post-closure. That doesn't reflect any change, and ideally this year we would have that fixed so that next year in our audit of this current fiscal year, it would show that it would be reduced to about 2.1 million. So just for the cost of a smart staff and the cost of a letter, we hope we can reduce that liability on paper by $500,000. The real number is the annual cost of collecting the water samples, the lab costs, and probably most significantly and certainly rationally, the auditor says, well, it would be way better, really better, safer, securer, if you could purchase landfill insurance. Liability insurance on the landfill would be the safest possible thing.
Good luck with that.
But it's a very expensive proposition, and it started out as being a requirement, and it isn't. I mean, our auditor said we had to do it, and I asked it to see if she had any actual law that required that. It's not a requirement that you have liability insurance. She's our auditor, and she's cautious, and she says you'd be much safer if you had it. But the effort to get that kind of insurance and the cost of getting it is going to be a judgment call as to whether you want to sink money into paying some other company for insurance, or whether you want to just take that same amount of money and start putting into a reserve fund that you have control over.
Is there a cost? Do you have a cost? Did somebody give you a bid on insurance?
On insurance? No. If you want me to get that, I will.
Because-
If you want to say in this response that board's directing staff to budget that out, doesn't all have to be done to respond to these corrective actions. You just need to say what you want to do about it. So if you want to give us direction to research that, I know where I'm going to go, because RCRC has a pool of landfills that do have insurance. I know I can get costs from them, and you can decide whether it's a better risk to sink some. I mean, first of all, start with, we don't have enough money to cover everything.
Right.
So saying we should have insurance is not the same as having the money to buy it. But if you want that, let's put that in the corrective action, and I
But
will
if
research that for you.
we're looking for a figure, let's start with a figure of what it would cost us for insurance, and then maybe that's the amount that we want to put away each year. And if you're asking for things that we want, let's put $100,000 away for the
Net assets?
for the reserve fund, and let's put another $100,000 away for depreciation, and let's get another $100,000 in here for
All right.
just in case. Well, you said you were open to requests. and-
Exactly. And I believe if you make that a majority vote, it will be that.
I think that if you put away the amount that the insurance would cost every year, does not mean that we're going to be able to cover an incident.
But
No, absolutely, but that's a starting point of what we can start discussing about putting away.
the last time I was approached on this, our insurance agent approached me and said, I've got this wonderful product for you. This insurance company is going to cover your landfill. Take whatever money you've set aside, you give it to them. Look how big they are. They've got all this money, and when you need it, they'll be there for you. Guess the name of that company?
AIG.
Bingo. So that
Actually, the AIG
was
component's still
not
not.
the company we gave our money to, and we have now closed our landfill using cash on hand and cash available. So now we're just in the post-closure, but there is that always unknown risk of something might happen. The Water Quality Board could require us to do something. There's this whole attention toward greenhouse gases and landfills. There are other things that could come up, and insurance won't necessarily cover that as much as having some extra money set aside. But, for example, if we wanted to amend, just look at the first page after the staff memo. Under insurance, even though we say there's no legal requirement, recommendation will be considered discretionary action subject to the judgment of the board. If you want to amend that, I would suggest that we amend that to say the board will direct staff to develop cost information for insurance. That's the kind of response that we need to have in the audit. That doesn't mean you're committed to do it, but that's your response to their concern that we should have insurance.
Well, I'd certainly like to see those costs.
I would too, and what would happen if we had an incident, this might be for an attorney, If we had an incident and we don't have insurance, does it fall back on the city and county, since we're the authority? Or does it just fall on the authority?
It's my understanding that the city and the county don't have responsibility for debt that the authority has created.
But we do
JPA
have the
is
responsibility.
a little vague on this point. What it specifically says is the city and the county don't have any more or less liability than they had before they entered into this agreement. And I believe that that was a very cautious way to avoid the inevitable answer to your question, Rich, is if the garbage hits the fan, then who's going to end up paying the cost? Whether it's the city or the county or shared is a question that's never been answered.
That's the way I take it. When it says don't have any more, any less, we have it.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
We
it
have it. We
depends
both
on
have to
which,
share that, and we have insurance. So maybe this authority needs insurance, and if it's too much, we have to consider other alternatives.
Like,
If we didn't have the authority, then the city would have its own insurance, and the county would have their own
Well,
insurance.
the question to be asked then is, does the city and the county already have insurance that cover it?
Exactly.
Whether it's excess insurance authority
That's-
through.
That's another question.
Seaside.
Maybe we already have it.
I think the response to the audit would be the same. Direct staff to research insurance options.
We may have it already.
Short answer to your question, I would be shocked if the city and county had landfill liability insurance, because somebody would, well, it's a hellacious application
I
process
can
to
tell you
begin
the
with.
city doesn't.
I believe the
But
county.
I'd like to know how much it would cost for the city to have it on their policy and how much it would cost for the county. Maybe it's cheaper than going through the authority.
Well, and that is actually one of the fundamental questions is, if we're talking about insurance, are we talking about buying insurance for the authority, which is essentially a disposable agency that could be disbanded on a vote, or the city and the county, which will always be here? So if we're talking about insurance, are we talking about just insurance for the solid waste authority? We're talking about insurance for the solid waste authority and the city and the county? And what's the proportionate liability and what's the proportionate coverage? And those are harder questions. But nevertheless, you can direct us to research that and come back with more information. Today, the action is to try to get these responses back to our auditor so she can finish up her audit. These need to be general responses.
Okay.
One of the things that concerned me was that when the county did the loan, the original loan for the transfer station, it was directed to set aside a $150,000 reserve fund.
Yeah.
And our audit says the county did not do so, and so we may be in violation of our facility sublease.
Yeah.
Can we correct that, please?
Yeah, just put another 150,000 there.
150,000, add it to the list. That's what we need to do is, well, first of all,
Well, I mean, maybe there's a
we have
reason
not
why
missed a
it
payment.
happened.
We have not missed a payment. We pay the money to the county. In fact, we pay the county, the interest rate we pay the county is 0.25% over what the county gets for the iBank. We pay the county, and then the county pays the iBank. We have never missed a payment. The county should want to have some money set aside in case we fail to make a payment so the county can make that.
I guess
And the
my
way that
question,
happened,
though,
if I can
is-
just,
Is that, was the 150,000 that was supposed to be set aside a part of the original amount of money that was borrowed?
yes.
So that 150,000 that was borrowed by the county in the beginning did not get set aside?
It did not get set aside, and that happened.
By solid waste.
Well,
But it
what
was
happened
supposed to be
was,
set
here's the overview. The money, only the county could get the financing. So it's 3.7% financing, which at the time was a great deal. It's still a pretty good deal. Then we had to have a relationship with the county, so, but, because we're the source of money. We generate the money from the transfer station, we make our payments to the county makes payments to the iBank. So in the construction process, we were expending money to build the transfer station. There were a number of lines that financing could happen on, such as engineering, capitalized interest, legal fees. One of them was a $150,000 reserve fund. Well, we got to payment request number 12 in this process as we're doing the construction. We submitted that in July 2006. This board, the previous members of this board, took an action on August of 2007, saying that when this money came in, direction to the county, that, because the checks all came to the county first. that the county should set aside $150,000. That money didn't actually come till after the end of the fiscal year, so it was entered as a journal entry at the end of the fiscal year. And even though this board said, keep $150,000, set it aside, that money didn't get set aside and it all got transferred into our fund. They didn't do it, we didn't notice. The money actually was all given to us, so it's our money to have to give back, but that's how it happened. It was an oversight, and how it happened was, I think only the previous auditor could tell us if she was still here.
So, I would like to make sure that we somehow budget for that. I mean, I know we can't do it all at once, but if we are, not in compliance with the lease, that's probably not prudent.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting that the board consider the recommendation to transfer unrestricted cash to a restricted reserve at the end of the current year. And I'm describing all these multiple reasons why we should have some money set aside, and I wish I could do exactly what Jerry's suggesting. Is that we should have enough to put into every one of those funds, but I don't see it happening in 1 year. It's gonna be multiple years as we start building up this reserve.
The last quick thing was, they recommended more accounting, training for our staff. How much time do we, spend with Richie Taylor each month, like on average?
It varies, I'd say 20 hours. He comes when we call.
For like $300 a month? That's pretty cheap. We'll like to increase our services.
Oh, Rich.
He's always
Rich
been
is
known
great.
as being pretty
Rich
cheap.
is
We
great
only
to work
pay
with.
him like $300 a month.
And probably
for
most
3 hours.
importantly, Rich is, speaks
Probably gets free coffee.
accountant language, whatever that is. So he's been, and I should say, the county auditor, Clinton Shad, has been great.
Right.
I mean, he's
My
very
point
good
is,
about
can we
providing
just work
information.
out a deal with Richie to provide our staff with some more nuts and bolts of accounting? And if they have suggested that you come up with an accounting checklist that you're following each month.
You're seeing this in last year's comments?
Yeah, it is 2011, but I think it's still needed.
Yeah, Rich helps whenever he can, and I agree that our staff could use some, specifically Rose has asked for training on QuickBooks and some of the basic bookkeeping things that she's doing. But we rely heavily and trust the county auditor's office to keep track. I mean, all the money goes to the county and all the payments go out of the county, and they're pretty good at keeping records on all of this stuff. And when the auditor comes into town to look at the primary records, they come here. They come here to the county building because all the primary records for our bookkeeping are here because we have a relationship with the county. There's very few documents that the auditor actually gets directly from us. But because the county keeps it up to date and there's an intranet connection that we can log into, anytime I need to look at a budget line or see where we're at with revenue or expenditures, I can get into the county's bookkeeping system and I can see exactly where we're at as far as tracking expenses.
Getting back to reducing the rates to the consumer, why isn't there a corrective action addressing a cut in salaries and benefits? As I recall, the ad hoc committee.
In the audit?
Yeah, and this.
The next item is actually talking about cutting rates.
One last thing then before we leave, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
If you're going to give us any sort of report on insurance, let me do it in the analysis and that. What is it we're trying to insure ourselves for? What is the anticipated threat and the anticipated liability, and then decide whether it's worth it or not. I mean, that's the only reason you get insurance, isn't it?
That'll be the judgment.
Well, you know, the thing that we might look into with insurance is whatever this permit fee that water quality is requesting, if we had insurance, would that satisfy them in not charging us that large of a fee? If there's no liability to them, why would they charge us this huge fee if we had insurance? So just some things to look at.
I can answer that one. It's a
Is it fee they
regulatory
charge us
fee.
the
It's
most?
their cost, they say it's their cost of regulating us. It's a permit fee. It's supposed to be
But they-
connected to their actual cost, but
But
it
they
isn't.
rated us at high exposure or huge risk, so they charge us more money. But if we covered that huge risk with insurance, would they have any justification for not that they have any justification now for charging us for that?
I will ask that question.
You would
How's that?
think.
Just, I
Compliments of
realize
the
that
state of California.
logical stuff does not usually work in
I will
activities.
ask that question, but I don't think that's
So
gonna.
I guess the only other question I had on the audits is the deficit net assets. Are we at a point where our revenue is covering our expenses?
This year,
Okay, so far year to date, we're there.
yeah.
Okay.
But
I'm good.
it's the
Well, and that-
residual debt that started before the Solid Waste Authority began that is still lingering. It's the residual debt on the post-closure, the residual liability on an unlined landfill. It's things that happened before all of you were involved with this stuff, and certainly before I even got into this town.
What
So-
about exploring reducing the interest rate? Have you done that, Kevin?
Be a county loan, so county would have to.
It's, exactly, Mike, it's the county, no, to answer your question, in short, no, it's a loan contract that's signed.
I'm going to open this up to public comment. Any public comment on this item, 6.1? Okay, I'm going to close the public comment period for this item then and bring it back. Any more questions? Direction, I guess, would be to adopt the corrective action plan
With the
with the
amendment.
with the
that-
changes, looking into the insurance.
Yes.
And looking for putting some funding away here and there for
Yeah,
other things.
everything's saying we should put funding away. You guys determine how much, I mean, you all of you, I say guys as a generic term. And I will amend it to include the direction to actually research and cost out landfill liability insurance.
Commissioner McClure.
Yeah, I would think we would want to do that, but I would want to put staff under the cloak of protection and relationship that somebody, either the chair and the vice chair, read it over of what the answers are. So you're comfortable. I mean, we talked about a lot of different pieces and how we were going to put the language together. And I don't want them to put the language together and then come back and somebody say, well, that's not what we had to say. So I would be
You
comfortable.
mean on the corrective actions?
Yeah.
Well, you want to take another look at it before?
I would be
Oh,
comfortable if the chair and
Sure.
the vice chair looked it over and said, yep.
I'm only going to change one sentence.
Yeah,
But just,
Gotcha.
sure.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to have the landfill liability insurance until, well, I'll try to come to the next meeting with it, because it's
Yeah.
important.
Okay, for the third time, in order to reduce ratepayers' obligations.
The chairman hasn't introduced that item yet. It's next.
No, that is not the next item. That's his meetings with Hambro and Recology. I'm talking
reduce
about,
customer
Reduce
rate.
customer
yeah,
rate.
but
This is on the corrective action.
I understand, but in order to deal with those items, we need to address reducing expenses like payroll and benefits and talking about reducing the interest rate on the county loan. Those can be corrective actions as well.
Yeah, but I think it's the specific ones in the audit that were these, that's what they're,
Well,
on the
how,
audit portion. That's the findings they found that on the audit that need to be addressed. In terms of reducing costs, that really would be the next, that's what we instructed staff to do between the last meeting and now, is look at reducing costs.
well, one of the way to reduce his costs is to look at payroll and benefits,
Which, yeah.
and that's not in here. It
No,
needs to
That's what
be.
the auditor came up with. That's not what the ad hoc or any of the other groups came up with. That's specifically to the auditor.
Anyway, they were directed to address the issues of the audit within the audit.
That's fine.
And we have direction.
It'd be better to have a vote.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Move to approve accepting the the 2010-11 audit and the adopted corrective actions with the so-mentioned changes that will be reviewed by the chair and the co-chair. Second?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Rose, would you poll the vote, please? We don't need to do that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
We have one opposed. The rest were all affirmative. Okay, moving on to item 6.2.
To reduce it. That was one of the meetings.
6.2, I have a short memo in the agenda, but I also have a short PowerPoint, which I'm going to walk you through, just to give you context, because if we're going to talk about how do we reduce the rates, it'd be helpful to understand why the rates are the way they are. We'll talk about that in the context of the zero waste plan, which has come up in previous meetings, but I think people don't understand why we did it or what it does. So I'm going to go through this as why did we do this. Next slide. Why zero waste plan? This was considered when we knew our landfill was going to be closed and a transfer station would have to be built and all non-recycled waste would have to be shipped 110 miles away. Knowing that the system costs would be less if we had less disposal, that local reuse and recycling will save us money, and that recycling businesses create jobs, we opted for a set of options where we could be more locally self-sufficient and self-reliant, basically taking care of our own stuff as much as possible instead of putting it on a truck, shipping it to a landfill. Next. It was developed using a grant from the Forest Service. We brought in experts from outside the county to help develop the plan, and the plan was completed in February 2000. This next slide is how the board responded to that, which was not totally embraced, but basically the commissioners agreed in concept. Though the board recognized that it's a guide and a vision for discard management, the board concluded that conceptual agreement with this plan does not constitute a wholesale approval of all policies and programs contained in this plan. This is the disclaimer on the inside page of the zero waste plan, just so everybody understands. Consequently, the board will consider each new policy or program on its individual merits, and parts of the zero waste plan may be implemented as economics allow. So it was set up basically as a list of options that if they made sense to you guys, we would do it. And if it didn't, we would not do it. So some of the things that have been approved, click. Well, first of all, it was based on a waste characterization study that was done in 1997. We went out to the landfill, sorted through garbage, weighed it, brought it down into proportionate categories so we'd be able to know what we have. 44 different categories of waste were measured. We looked at what existing recycling or reuse facilities we have. We looked at where we don't have services. Where would service be needed if we wanted to be able to have more local options? And then service opportunities were identified where we could develop alternatives if it made sense. And I mean, it makes sense financially. My standard is if we can do something that's cheaper than putting garbage in a truck and shipping it off to somebody else's landfill, then that's a cost-effective option to consider. I want to go over through the thinking on this because this wasn't just a crazy idea that got made up. It really was a good strategic plan for how we could not have a landfill and still have some self-reliance. So targeted programs were prioritized and, of course, only implemented after board approval. Next slide. Things that, is my 3 minutes up? The transfer station, part of the zero waste plan was including a resource recovery park. And included with that is the transfer station designed for maximum recovery. That is, rather than just a place where garbage goes in and garbage goes out, set it up and design it so that we can set lower rates for recyclables and the kinds of things that we do have lower rates on that can be recycled and at the transfer station include metals, grass, leaves, brush, clean lumber, asphalt, concrete, TVs, appliances, for example. Those are the kinds of things. And then outside we have a drop-off for all the other household recyclables, including glass cans, plastic, cardboard, newspaper, magazines, and office paper. Part of the zero waste plan and part of the resource recovery park plan included a reuse resale. Take good stuff off the garbage transfer station floor, put it aside into a resale shop, Hambro picked that up. It was always intended to be a private option. We thought it might be co-located in our property adjacent to the transfer station. But they had the vision, they had the facility, they have the ability and the motivation to do that. The system is set up so that more Hambro pulls out of the waste stream, the less they have to put in a truck, they save costs. So the system saves by having multiple options for pulling waste out of the waste stream. And the resale is popular with residents because it gives a good place to buy used stuff for cheap, so it saves people in that way too. And most recently, with the new collection franchise, collection services were expanded to be available for all residential and commercial customers. And as we hit on earlier, state law now requires commercial recycling starting July 1st. So we were ahead of the curve in making those services available, and that was part of the zero waste plan. Next options to consider. In my memo, I recommend that we take some steps in evaluating the potential of composting. Local composting takes material and avoids that export and disposal cost. Other options for discussion possibly later that were part of the Resource Recovery Park Phase 2 is incubator for recycling-based businesses. For example, if we took the plastic that everybody's separating and we had a business locally that could make a product out of that plastic, you create a niche business, you create some jobs, you create an opportunity. That we have 5 acres set aside with the potential to do that, and with the buzz lately about green jobs, combined with that could be a green job training center, training youth or unemployed how to have skills that meet the new economy. Those are later on. Our first and more recovery of construction and demolition are on the list of top possibilities, but I want to focus on composting because I think that's our #1 option. Click. This is the 1997 study, but proportionally, we're still looking at pretty much the same percentage. So these are things, at least a good portion of it, the food waste, is currently in the garbage. It's part of what is garbage going off to a landfill someplace else. Things that can be composted include food, biosolids, which is a fancy word for sewage sludge, food paper, which is food contaminated paper, contaminated so that it can't be recycled, but it still could be composted, vegetation, including the brush, grass, leaves, and wood. Combined, 16 to 20% of our waste stream is this material. Why is that important? Click. Need to understand how the disposal fees are split. And for this meeting, I'm focusing on the 66% that are the Hambro costs. Under our contract, they get 66.54% of every dollar per ton that comes into the transfer station. And if you want, and if there's an interest, Donna, at the next meeting, we can look in some depth on the authority side of this equation to see if there's a potential for savings there. I'm certainly willing to do that. I don't have that prepared for today. Next slide. Of the money that goes to Hambro, now this is really important to understand, how they get paid is based on their costs. And if you look at the 3 components of the disposal costs, the cost per ton that people pay for garbage is dependent on these 3 things. $34.96 is what their fixed costs are for operating the facility, their staff, their equipment, the things that are being supported by a somewhat dwindling supply of garbage. The 2 things that we may have flexibility or control over is the transportation to the landfill and the disposal at the landfill. So if you consider that 60% of the cost of disposing garbage is transportation and disposal to a landfill, that is the margin that we look at to see if we can do something that's cheaper than garbage. So if we were looking at organics collection, organics processing, if it was less than $134 a ton, if that margin could bring us in for less than $27 for disposal and less than $27 for transportation, there is a margin there that might work for us. We'll have to research that further. Next slide. On the collection side, how are the collection rates established? And the largest part, or certainly the largest recognizable single part of collection cost, is disposal. What I'm showing you here are the actual costs that were proposed. How do we get these rates? We had a competitive process. These are the costs that Ecology proposed, and now they're in our contract. What I want you to show here in this bar graph is the cost for driving the truck down the road, which is the collection cost, And the transportation cost is at the end of the route, getting it to the transfer station. And then the disposal cost is the cost at the transfer station. So you can see the cost of collecting a 3 cubic yard trash container, $331, is more than the cost of picking up brush, predominantly because the cost of disposing of brush at the transfer station is $46.99 compared to the cost of disposing of garbage at the transfer station, which is $134. Again, if there was a margin in there where we could be collecting organic waste, a mixed organic waste stream, for less than 134, it would probably be more than 46, but if it was less than the cost of disposal, then the financing, or at least the economics of this, might work out. And then if you look at the cost of collecting a 3 cubic yard recyclables only, there's zero disposal cost on that. And so as you have less disposal cost, the collection cost also is less. I put that up just so you can see where the cost factors are, where the cost components are. And the reason what I'm suggesting is I think the biggest possibility we have is to start processing more of our waste locally, and the huge portion of waste that's organic is the big target because we have an existing compost operation. Hambro has a permit for a composting operation. It would have to be expanded. There's a lot of research and analysis to do before we can say for sure this is going to work, and frankly, I think nobody wants to spend too much time doing that research unless the board has an interest in seeing the results of that. But with your direction, we would proceed with continuing to meet with Hambro and Recology to see if there's a path before us that would allow a reduced collection for the organic portion of our waste stream that ultimately would capture a large portion of what is currently trash. So rather than looking at how can we reduce the actual fixed contracted cost of garbage, we will continue to focus on how can we develop collection or recycling or disposal systems that are at a cost that are less than garbage, and that's the way that we have to be able to reduce our rates.
On organics.
Organics at this point.
Do we know what the percentage of organics might be?
The 97 studies suggested that
I can't remember what
those
the
things
slide
were
said.
about 16%.
16?
The sewage, the biosolids, is a little more than that at this point. And we think because we've been separating brush, grass, leaves, the quantity for vegetation is probably higher than that out of our total waste stream. We don't have, because this is a
You
very
don't have
expensive
biosolids anymore.
and cost-intensive effort to do a waste characterization study. But we can come up with some pretty fair numbers as far as what do we have in all these various categories. The food waste we don't collect separately, so it'll have to be a mathematical analysis on that. But I think we can come up with refined numbers on what we think we could capture. It's probably going to take several iterations back and forth to you to bring you status reports on how we're going with this. It would, Recology has said that they would participate if we set up an outlet for organics because they know their cost for disposal would go down. And predominantly, we're leaning on our friends at Hambro to spend some time to at least take it to the next level. It may prove to not be feasible because the last time we put this out to bid, the cost of organic processing in a composting facility was more expensive than what we're doing with brush right now, and it didn't make sense to do it at the time. But a number of things have changed since then, and one of them is that Hambro may have more space available to work with to be able to process this stuff inside, because when you're doing organic composting, rain is an issue, weather is an issue, having facility inside is important. If we didn't have to build a building, that cuts down on the capital cost, and it may make it more feasible to do.
Is this something that we're only looking for Hambros to handle? Or is this something that Recology can do? Or are we just,
They
are we
already
just
have the permit.
just focusing on one organization, or is there a way to focus on multiple organizations? I understand that they've got the permit, but is there, are there other options, or?
Because we did meet after I was clearly directed to meet with everybody in the same room, and Rich is my witness. They were all there, right? Is that we have the potential to be partners on this, and everybody has their role, and we need to bring something to the table as well. Recology has a good amount of experience in other places. They do composting, and Tommy's offered to take us on a tour. They're the collection company, so they're not necessarily interested in being the processor. Our contract with Hambro has them in the major role on this because that's where everything comes, to the transfer station. So we're looking at an outlet where from the transfer station, those organics could go to a different place for local processing, thereby boosting local businesses, perhaps creating some jobs, and ideally lowering the disposal or the composting rates or the cost for that service. So the reason that we're going first to Hambro is that we had a competitive process. We put out an RFP for organics processing. We got only one proposal a couple years ago, and that was these guys. So they've done some research. We've gone through a competitive process.
I just want to make sure we continue on with that.
Yeah.
Not to say that would not be our.
My sense from the meeting was everybody's on board to take this to the next step, and also everybody's not convinced absolutely that it's going to work, but because you're asking us to think outside the box and look for options, this is, in my opinion, the most likely, biggest bang, the greatest possibility of success is by looking at this, and it all has to do with not putting garbage in a truck and paying to ship it to somebody else's landfill, where we're just basically shipping our money out of the county.
And you won't get any disagreement from me.
A couple things on these organic feedstocks figures from 15 years ago. Would you say that the numbers are very similar today?
I think the tonnage might be a little different, but the percentages are probably pretty close. Our waste hasn't changed that much.
And
for example, the current numbers on sludge is probably about 1,000 tons.
And the dwindling supply of garbage, what do you attribute that to?
Partially the economy, partially expanded recycling, partially that we're actively pursuing a course to drive ourselves into bankruptcy. We actively tell people how to recycle, to have less garbage, to save money, and there's an endpoint to this that is hard to predict and may be difficult. But if we start processing our own stuff, if we start becoming partners where instead of shipping that $60 a ton to Oregon, that money's staying here, that there may be a portion of that organics processing fee that would be the same or equivalent to what we're getting right now on garbage, that our portion of fees wouldn't necessarily have to change. Their portion of operations fees wouldn't necessarily have to change, and we could still find a margin, perhaps, where it can be processed and the prices can be reduced to the customer and still have sufficient revenue. As we discussed earlier, we have certain fixed obligations, in some extent, carried over from 25, 30 years ago that we're trying to maintain with the revenue stream that we have. So we, at some level, have to have people to run the transfer station, people to maintain and close the landfill, to operate the post-closure maintenance. There's certain fixed costs for, like, financing of the transfer station that we have to cover. So we're not thrilled about the idea of not having any revenue, because we have an obligation on that end, but the direction was to find ways where we could reduce the rates, and this is the best idea as a group we could come up with.
Any public comment? Wes? Tommy? Okay, any board members? Questions, comments?
Take the organics out, but we leave all
I
options
think,
on the table.
I think it's a perfect start.
So, consensus?
Continue on.
Pull the organics out of the material.
I see lots of heads bobbing. You know, last time it was really hard for me. I wasn't used to looking at 10 people, and it was hard to gauge consensus.
Well, I'm just floored that it's coming to us as a new idea.
It's not a new idea.
No, we tried it, but the price before.
It's an idea
years
whose
ago.
time has
2 years
come,
ago.
maybe.
Cost
Yeah. Well, like I said,
Actually, if we go a little further back, the prison actually offered to build a methane generator that would have taken waste out of the system.
Anaerobic.
yeah,
Anaerobic digester.
that
Yeah,
was an
makes a
option
lot
that
of
was
sense.
considered, and even they acknowledged that that would have been difficult to make work. Jerry said.
Yeah.
I think we need to go to the next level. Let's find out what we can do.
That's what we're looking for, because we'll spend some time on it. We'll get more details, and we'll come back next meeting
Great.
with with more details, but we wanted to make sure that you thought it was a good idea, because it is going to take some effort, and it is going to take some staff time as well.
You bet. Okay, we're going to move on to the last item, and I put this on because there seems to be a huge amount of vagueness in this solid waste task force on who they report to, who they are appointed by, and even though the county appointed them.
Jerry, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but since it was really nice presentation, but it was discussion of possible action regarding results of a meeting with Recology Hambro Waste Solutions, consideration of potential options to reduce customer rates. Under that discussion, nothing was brought up about some of the things we read about in the newspaper, for example, or even that you haven't read about in the newspaper, where the school was able to go back and restructure a deal with Recology. Some businesses were able to do that, that actually lowered their rates, whether it was through different sized bins, whether it was through more recycling, whatnot. And it occurred to me when reading some of this is the work that our staff should be doing, is encouraging, grabbing the business owners that have complaints or that need to find strategies to lower their waste stream or lower their cost, and provide them with a strategy.
We do that.
Well, apparently...
We do that when businesses contact us, when residents contact us, we help them talk through. Because there's new services available.
Right, and that's the kind of outreach I would like to see us doing. And it didn't come to light until some people got real mad about the increase in costs, and then it was apparent that there are some solutions, and that's the emphasis I would like to see us working
I
on.
would like to hear a little bit more about you say struck a new deal. That makes it sound like they got a lower rate than other people, and
Well, they did, but because it was a different than the traditional cans that they were using, perhaps, or the collection times.
We've been trying for years.
Well,
I'd just like to hear a little more about how they
Better
finally got
outreach
to that point.
to let people know, more active outreach to let people know that if they call us, maybe they don't expect that we're actually going to help them give us less money. It's an odd thing, you have to admit.
Right.
But it is what we do. And there is a lot of businesses that have called, and I'll take those calls personally, and I'll walk them through their options. And there's usually an option, especially like with apartments, where it used to be just a dumpster, and that's all you had. But now when you get a dumpster, you get recycling included with that.
Right.
So if you're getting those recycling carts, you can size down your dumpster. Plus, you're getting bulky item collection included with that. It's a good service.
It is a good service, and I guess what I'm getting
Better
at is I would love to see some publication of outreach by our staff, solid waste staff.
Case example.
Yeah, I just got a notification from Recology on how I could reduce my waste costs at my business.
Yeah.
And I just got it yesterday, I think.
Yeah. So we're stepping up, David. I mean,
And
Recology's doing
it's
it.
finally getting out there. It's been a slow go, but finally getting out there. And there's three different, the plan that was sent to me was three different options for what I've got. And they're all cheaper than what I'm using now, so.
I guess my point is I didn't know that. I thought you had to complain, that some people did, and I'm just saying
I was getting ready to.
I would think that the best use of our staff time is
education,
consulting people and educating people as to how they can actually do that. And if you're doing it, great.
Every time we get a call, but, you know, we're not going knocking on doors, just to be clear. We're not
Right.
going outreach, and we don't, except to the extent that we have the beverage container grant, where we can use some of that for outreach, because it's related to recycling. And we don't, I mean, there's certain potential for advertising there as well.
I think it's a great idea for businesses to know they can get some one-on-one consultation, but I have to say that when we negotiated the franchise agreement with Recology, one of the requirements was for them to do a lot of outreach, and they have done a lot of outreach. They have spent tens of thousands of dollars doing outreach, and they have one person dedicated, Lori Poole, who has been amazing about, she's done meetings for landlords, she's done a lot of, tried to do a lot of education. So I think they have done their part, and I'd love to see us do more one-on-one consulting with businesses to supplement that.
I'd like to speak just a little bit. You mentioned the school district, and on the 9th of February, the school board actually considered a report after a great deal of discussion with Recology. And through the use of recycling bins and smaller bin sizes for garbage, they were actually successful in getting the rate 5.8% less than it was before the rates went up. So I mean, this was a very successful discussion with Recology, and I think on behalf of the school district, at least, I can say that I appreciate their efforts.
Yeah, I think Recology has done an excellent job in reaching out, and it does require that people rethink how they do garbage. I mean, we are personally, as an agency or as staff, are not making people recycle. What we have done is we've made those services available. What I hear your suggestion is continue to do outreach and help people adjust. If you want to continue to have garbage, it will be more expensive. If you want to adjust and do more recycling because it's in your financial interest, then we will help people to make that adjustment. Anytime people call us, we will take that call and we'll help them through it.
Ted, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that in an earlier action that happened as part of the consent agenda, the board essentially directed staff to comply with the state law to do targeted outreach to businesses that dispose of 4 cubic yards or more per week. So looking at ways that they can,
Right.
1, comply with the law, and 2, increase recycling and reduce their costs.
You know, though, on the other side of it, if I owned a business and my rate tripled, I think I'd want to know about it before it tripled. I think maybe what we should have done, is before we became a whole board, is do it before the rates went up. Like saying, under your current way, your rate's going to go from here to here. But if you want to come in and talk about how to keep your rates down, come in and see us. That way we wouldn't have so many upset and mad commercial customers, because we had plenty of time to do it. That's my take on it. Because it seems like we're doing it after the fact. Like, we're supposed to put up about Walgreens. I didn't know Walgreens almost tripled. I was going to ask you tonight I'd like a list of every city business that went up. But now that you're doing that outreach, they're going to have the opportunity to lower their rates and choose.
But theoretically, if every business continued to dispose of the same amount of garbage, the rate is going to go up because the rates went up with Recology. But the whole incentive was to provide more recycling, because previously there was less recycling allowed. And so if you did more recycling, then Recology's whole shtick was that you could actually lower your bill.
Right. But I think that should have been done before the bills went up, so the people could have come on board.
Yeah.
I'll accept that as a criticism, but I can't.
He just can't stand it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Tommy Sparrow with Recology. The outreach began well before the rates went into effect. We spent multiple dollars in brochures, advertising on the radio, putting it in the newspaper, and to date, we have had 3 commercial business call us. 3. Can't do but so much. We sent letters out. There's more letters going out today. We have, Sherry, help me, maybe 80 different customers we're sending individual letters to. Mike should have got one. Everybody that has a business will get
I got one. Tommy, is that the kind of outreach you did prior to, though? I mean,
The outreach prior to that was, the rate structure is this. It was designed for the commercial accounts. It was designed for the residential accounts and the multifamily accounts. Individual information went to everyone.
But the little package, or not, the little flyer that I got this time was
That
pretty
was
specific.
tailored to a specific account in the very beginning.
But that's not the kind of outreach you did.
Not
in
then.
the very beginning.
It was a broader saying, hey, Jerry, your rates are going up. You need to recycle. Give us a call.
Well, I mean, it's like, hey, your rates are going.
That's pretty much what it was.
Your rates are going up. What's new? You know, I mean, but this was pretty specific, and it laid it out very nicely.
And we had to, and we spent a lot of time with the school district, multiple days and meetings and hours just with the school district, many years before this happened. And many years. And until it happened, and they said, oh my God, what have you done? And then they found, we didn't reduce the rates. The rates are the same as everybody in the world pays in Del Norte County. They began using the system. The system is there to be used.
How we got into this conversation is I suggested maybe our solid waste staff, the people are trying to justify an existence for, it would be a great segue into them assisting complainants in dealing with you.
And
So
they
I'm
have.
finding out. But obviously, the people that talk to me haven't used the service. There's the rub.
Well,
So I'm just saying, maybe another little,
Tell them to call me. David.
great.
And some of the customers
Great.
that have
And
called,
maybe even something in the newspaper saying, hey, got a problem with rates, call me.
and even some of the customers that have called, I've called back and they won't return calls. So, you can only do
We can try.
so much.
And we can always do better. Rich, David,
Gotcha.
on down the line.
You got a lot of garbage to pick up. Wind's blowing.
Hey, that was the only thing I wanted to talk about under that.
Solid Waste Task Force,
Yes,
the meeting has been changed.
okay.
We discovered that 4 out of 6 new appointees couldn't make the date that we picked. So we've rescheduled that date to Thursday, March
Yes.
22nd.
If I could, and I don't know whether it's, that's why I put it on this agenda, was that I could include the city in reaffirming the appointments that the county made, and maybe this entire board could also reaffirm that they don't have a problem with the appointees, and that just because of the vagueness of this, the way this whole thing is put together, I just want to make sure that there's not a problem with the people that the county appointed. We're not trying to overstep our bounds or to step in somebody else's authority. So if the city members don't have a problem with the appointees, then we'll continue on with those. If they do, or if they want to, I think there's still a vacancy or two, isn't there? Is there still one vacancy?
There, in fact, is one. Since I wrote this memo, we discovered that Patricia Abbey wants to resign, so at least there's one opening.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking there might be two. So there's still room for people to get involved in the solid waste task force, but I just want to make sure that the city doesn't have a problem with the appointees that were brought to the county, because that's the way it's been done.
Well, after speaking with you and finding out that you appointed everyone that applied,
Right.
I'm okay with that. That's
Yeah.
fine.
So,
Very,
But that's all you have applied.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only right to appoint. I agree.
okay,
I
so if we have consensus on that, then I won't take it any farther than that.
Could you just provide like a 1-minute executive summary? Because I know a lot of people have asked me about where did this task force come from, who did they report to? Could you just provide that for the public's knowledge since this is being taped?
yeah. This is, I did attach the small section of the Public Resource Code that establishes the local task forces. This got, it was part of the AB 939, 50% recycling mandate for local governments that got passed in the late 80s, early 90s, started implementing it. This is what has driven everybody to develop an integrated waste management plan that includes what are you going to do about recycling and hazardous waste and all those things. The local task force was an integral part in developing those plans to ensure that there was a avenue for public input. Literally and technically, the task force only has to meet every 5 years to review that plan and determine if there's any change that needs to be made. However, we have had, I think, a very productive group over the last 5-6 years in engaging them in what we would refer to as somewhere later in the things the task force can do, including identifying solid waste issues of countywide or regional concern. There have been a number of subjects that have been referred by this board to the task force to allow for more detailed discussion about issues. So in the past, what has the Solid Waste Task Force done? The Solid Waste Task Force was involved with the original review and drafting of the solid waste and recycling responsibility ordinance that was looking at illegal dumping and what do we do about that. The Solid Waste Task Force was involved with reviewing the initial list of service standards and preferred services for the new collection franchise. So the Solid Waste Task Force was advisory on that. The two things that we currently have on the plate that are carried over from the previous task force and previous direction of the board is to look at our household hazardous waste plan and to integrate product stewardship as an element of that plan. Product stewardship, as we've discussed earlier, as one of the options for dealing with hazardous products that are very common, like needles and batteries, fluorescent tubes. And then the second is to go back and review the solid waste responsibility ordinance, which was adopted originally to try to cut down on illegal dumping, basically by making people responsible. Does not require that everybody has to sign up for garbage service, and the task force was really essential to that advisory role in when there were some board members that thought mandatory collection would be just the thing and that would be simple and it would solve all the problems. The members on the Solid Waste Task Force, with their breadth of local experience, decided nobody likes to be told that they have to do that. Nobody will like that, and when you have half of the people that are responsible self-haulers, we should preserve that option. So the task force operates on that level where we can spend an hour and a half talking about the level of details from a broad perspective of representative appointees. And so this previous version of this board asked that we go back and look at that responsibility ordinance to see if there could be an amendment that would allow landlords to comply with the law by putting, instead of requiring landlords pay for the garbage service and pass it through to the tenants, to allow the landlords to put a clause in their lease that says the tenant must sign up for garbage service. It's not allowed currently under the ordinance, but it's a reasonable response. I mean, a reasonable request. And the board wanted us to have a meeting with every landlord, property owner, real estate person that cares to come to talk about how that ordinance is affecting them. And Victoria Dickey and Richard Miles are our test case on that, because they're the ones that are working their way through trying to do the right thing, and what does that all mean?
I'm glad you brought that up, Kevin, because on the next agenda, I would like to put the ordinances on there. And since we have the commission now is made up of all the city members and all the county members, county supervisors and city council, that we talk about the authority of the solid waste authority being able to pass ordinances that affect the city and the county without them being ratified or okayed by the city and the county.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Because they're
it's
not
set up
all
right
elected.
now,
They're
the
not all.
JPA
They were not all elected officials that were on the JPA before. There was there was a member from
Right,
the public.
and I know eventually we're evolving into some discussion of how to update or amend the JPA so that it reflects those concerns
It represents the whole county.
in a good way. The JPA does allow for ordinances to be adopted by this board, even when there were only 5 members. The JPA empowers the board to do that. But I see the logic, both for practical and political reasons, to have that extra step somehow, either before adoption of an ordinance or as an additional level. There's multiple ways to do that, but you ask it for the next meeting, so I won't go into it now.
Yeah, and I think if we pass an ordinance, what is the requirement? Is it simple majority for an ordinance, or does it?
Yes.
Simple majority for an ordinance, so that would take at least 3 members to pass an ordinance in the county. And for the city, I'm assuming it's the same. So how can you pass an ordinance for the whole county when you only have, when you have a minority of members of the city and minority members of the county?
You certainly can question that, but all I can point out is the joint powers agreement that was approved by the city and the county delegated that power to this board. You can change it in the same way that it was adopted, but that power was granted as a common power.
No, I agree with the chair. I do think we need to bring it up, because I see a
Yeah, you
potential
got it.
flaw with that is,
Next agenda.
even over a year ago, you only had 60% of the county not represented on this board.
I understand your rationale, but next agenda, right?
Yes, please. Excuse me, Donna has a.
Yeah,
has
I
a-
have an objection to Richard Miles being appointed to the task force, because I see that he resigned over the garbage burn issue in the past, and I find that he flip-flops an awful lot. So I just wanted to voice my objection, because I would like to see garbage to burn or waste to energy discussed. I think it's the way of the future, and that's my opinion.
Well,
Me too.
the supervisors did it.
Richard's been an advocate of the advisory board for some time.
He's the squeaky wheel that
Yep.
got us all on board
And
with doing
sometimes
the
he
appointments.
has very lucid, clear understanding of things, and probably has opinions.
I
Not
think-
every one of us up here that may flip-flop, so.
Well, we got two members sitting over there.
Really quick, on a point of clarification. In the legislative Article 2, it says that the membership of the task force should be determined by the county but approved by the city. Since we are sitting here and we have a majority, can we
That's why I
just,
was asking.
but I'm saying, can we just vote, can the city take a vote up here to approve this? We don't have to do it on our agenda at the city level?
You probably do.
That's a legal question.
No, I think if it's action of the city, it needs to be on the city council
Okay.
agenda.
Sorry, just trying to save a step.
Okay, so at this point, I think since Donna has brought up the issue, that it's probably going to have to be put on your agenda. Public comment.
Andy Larson, the county. From what Kevin said, now I read this and I've got two questions. By what this tells me, this isn't a once in 5 year job. Who do I answer to as the task force? Solid Waste Board, the county? I mean, this we have to know.
It's a $64 million question.
And by just what is outlined on item C, there's 5 items there of just what the task force shall do, get done, is responsible to do by whoever appointed them in either A or B, depending on how you determine what the county and the city's relationship is. But it's clearly identified what the task force to ensure a coordinated and cost-effective regional recycling system, the task force shall do the following. That's state mandated. That isn't county mandated, city mandated, task force, JPA, anybody else. That's a state mandate that put that in front of the task force. And that includes, as spelled out in this section, 6 pages that the task force alone, not the Solid Waste Authority, not anybody else. I take it that the appointed people are responsible for 6 pages as spelled out by the state.
I can't tell what you're hanging up.
That's the section.
Oh, okay, we have a copy of
That's a section of that.
To the, yeah, okay, I see now what you have. I see now what you have.
And I guess what I'm trying to say, I take this seriously. You know, I was appointed and I'm glad to be of service to the people that elected you guys. I mean, I don't take this as for me, for you, or for anybody else. My responsibility is laid out here as I took an oath, and I am doing something for the citizens of Del Mar County, which includes the city, however deemed. I don't take it lightly, and I understand as per the Solid Waste Board would like to see these 2 issues taken care of. But at the same time, I have a responsibility to take care of these issues. So first of all, I need to know who's my boss. You know, what do we...
Historically, what we've done is we've asked, if we have a task that we think needs to happen, like the 2 that are identified, historically, this board has said to the Solid Waste Task Force, will you take this up, please? And then if they had something that they wanted to take up, they would say, you know, we're taking this up. I mean, it's a dialogue, and then there's been assistance from staff to help record the meetings and help get your message back to us.
It would be nice, though, that they do bring up a legitimate question about who they respond to on that.
And that is a
The
legitimate
board,
question.
it's always been to the board.
To the Board of Supervisors?
No, to the solid waste board.
That's not what
That's what I'm saying.
That's not what it says here.
That's what it
Oh,
says.
do you want
Where does it say it?
It doesn't say.
That's the question.
Well, you know, it does say in number 4, it says, "To the extent possible, facilitate resolution of conflicts and inconsistency between or among city and county source reduction and recycling elements." In our county, the city and county is the authority. We're one. This was written for the entire state, and every place I've lived in the past, the city had the contract for it. There was no solid waste authority. The city and county are one here, so that's our board. That's how I interpret that law.
But that's written before,
Right,
that was written before there was a solid waste authority.
right. So we're city and county together, so that would be who that task force reports to. I don't think we need a legal opinion on that. I think it's pretty clear. We're together. Now, if we were separate, the task force would have to report to both.
Why don't we review our own local ordinance or resolution that form the task force with the duties and specify that they report to the solid waste board?
Yeah, that's pretty well what I'm asking.
And that may
is
already
get
be
some clear
there
orders.
someplace.
And then we review it, put it on the agenda for next week.
Gretchen, did you do any research on this?
No, we want you guys to figure out what kind of services you want to have with garbage pickup. Then they worked and worked and worked, and then came back. And then we worked and worked and worked.
Oh, yeah, I have no intention of getting into anything that isn't workable and works for the best of anybody.
It's just been
It's a broader responsibility.
I'm done.
Thank you.
Good. I'm done.
Okay, I think we're all just about done. Well, that streamlining of the agenda worked pretty well.
Thanks for that, Jared.
Good job.
Well, at least we got,
He's buying beers now, Dave.
Until he says adjourned.
I'll try to knock it down. We're going to work on that. But we did get through everything this time.
Yeah.
Which was much better than we did last time. We're going to hone that director's report up a little bit, I think. That you did good, Kevin. Work on that a little bit. And maybe, I guess there's just too many of us for discussion.
When's our next meeting? March.
Next meeting. It's fourth Tuesday in March.
Fourth Tuesday in March. And with that, we are adjourned.
That would be